Hey, come on in and spend some time with the film hobbyist. My name is Lydia, and I love movies. We're sitting here in my attic room. Behind me is my desk. I don't have many photographs up here. I have trouble actually getting around to printing them out, let alone acquiring frames. But here's one. This is me and my husband, ages ago, back when my hair was long, and so was his. We match. I'm in a black winter coat, a cranberry-colored crocheted scarf around my neck. My husband is in a black hoodie, his scarf, crimson and black stripes. And we're squished together, our cheeks pink in the damp chill of a British winter day. We took this on a trip from London to Scotland, making a couple of stops along the way. Our first was in Nottingham, which was a really excellent choice. London is lovely, but in many ways it feels like every other major city in the world. We got a lot more of the feel of regular old England in a mid-sized city with literal layers of history throughout. As in, there are underground tunnels that had historical use. Trying to kill time, we went to the Museum of Justice that takes you through the history of legal procedures in the city. We were the only people on the tour. It was really interesting. I learned the story of the 1831 riot where the citizens burned down the Duke of Newcastle's home and the unjust retribution brought against the crowd, which actually inspired a short story that I wrote. But while we were there, sitting in the old courtroom, the presenter asked us why we, two young Americans, were in Nottingham. "I hope it isn't because of that Robin Hood nonsense," she said. We both grinned a little sheepishly. "Because of course we were there for the Robin Hood nonsense. The Museum of Justice is built on the site of the original Nottingham Castle, and we got to see the Sheriff of Nottingham's dungeons." They were creepy. There's a mannequin down there just to freak people out, but it was really cool to go. We didn't make it out to Sherwood Forest. It's an awfully long walk on a short winter day, but we took some fantastically cringy pictures with the statues of Robin and his merry men. Both of us are big Robin Hood fans. My husband took archery in college, and we once went on a group date to an archery range dressed up as Robin and Maid Marian, where he won an archery contest against the owner, who was also named Robin. I grew up with Robin Hood stories. We had an easy reader book I devoured when I was little, and then we had a collection of the stories and history available for when I was older. We even had the Robin Hood Lego set, the one with the forest hideout. We also had a cassette tape of actual Robin Hood songs, like the ones from 400 years ago. Kid me thought they were very boring. I had a good bit of fun playing Robin Hood adventures outside, pretending our desert jungle of a front yard was a deciduous forest. My novel holds fragments of these dreams, playing off of Robin Hood vibes and aesthetics. So, of course, I was a big fan of the movie we're talking about today, 1973's Robin Hood, released by Walt Disney Animation. We didn't own it, but it was always a favorite at friends' houses or during one of those rare days of indoor recess at school. I particularly loved the angsty end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3, where all the townsfolk are unjustly locked in prison and Robin and Little John have to break them all out. Unfortunately, the perspective of time and age have not been kind to this film. Watching as an adult, it's really apparent how cheap it all looks. The sketchy animation style screams lack of polish more than artistic choice, and the animation recycling really stands out. Even as a kid, I could tell it was weird that Little John was just Baloo the bear from the Jungle Book, down to the same voice. But now I can't unsee Baloo and King Louis's dance in the phony King of England song, smashed right next to Snow White dancing with the dwarfs and Duchess and Thomas O'Malley's dance from the Aristocats. It's so blatant and awful. The opening scroll of this movie repeats animation. It's just recycled frames to pad an already slim runtime. And the rest of the movie is a mess too. It's not entirely clear who our point of view characters are meant to be. It starts out as Robin and Little John, then it becomes the group of kids, and there really isn't cohesion between any of these vignettes. Neither is it fully episodic. It's trying to be both things. And yet, I think it might actually be the most accurate portrayal of traditional Robin Hood we've seen on film. Now, to be clear, this movie doesn't fully capture Robin Hood. We're missing most of the merry men. We don't see most of the usual stories, not Robin's hunting of the deer, which made him an outlaw, or his meeting of Little John, or the feast with the Sheriff of Nottingham's men, or the iconic death of Robin Hood. Frankly, it would be hard for any movie to fully capture Robin Hood because there are as many versions of historical Robin Hood as there are filmed Batmans. His mythos is long and shifting. And yet, I still think this film gets closer to Robin Hood the folk hero than any other attempt. First, this movie understands something no other Robin Hood film does. Robin Hood exists as a character because of folk music and folk ballads. Robin Hood is older than the printing press. The audience for tales of his exploits was illiterate. And while yes, spoken stories have always been a part of oral tradition, sung stories were a really big deal in the 14th and 15th century England, where Robin Hood makes his first appearances. And those first appearances aren't the tales, they're references to Robin Hood, like some pop culture reference in a rap lyric. When we finally get the actual stories inscribed, they are ballads, music and lyrics together. The character of Alan a Dale, a minstrel, was a late addition to the historical cast of merry men, only showing up in the 17th century. But his existence in the canon is a beautiful way to honor this musical legacy. While he often shows up as a background character in filmed Robin Hood stories, he's usually just a name. There aren't many filmed references to his harp, or his song, or the folk musical legacy. It really just plays a part in two adaptations, Ridley Scott's 2010 film and the Disney animated movie. Now, I have a real soft spot for the Ridley Scott film. Terrible Robin Hood adaptation, laughable historicity, but a pretty rad medieval action film with an awesome soundtrack. It's one of my problematic faves. Alan a Dale here is played by the appropriately named Alan Doyle, a real-life folk musician. Here he plays the lute and sings comic tunes while the merry men are, well, making merry. His music is woven into the soundtrack, most notably after the band pulls their one heist. But he isn't a storyteller, just a musician. This is a tricky thing to capture and explain to our modern culture. With the rare and beautiful exception of musical theater, we don't have a way of telling story through song. The two things are generally separate, unless you're in a music appreciation class. We think of a minstrel as a musician first, not a storyteller. Mel Brooks tries to capture this storytelling tradition with the opening rap in Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is definitely a tone setter, smashing modern sounds with costume medieval aesthetics. Where this fails is that rap isn't so much of a storytelling form of music as one of rhetoric. You generally have a rapper making some kind of a persuasive argument, whether it's that they are the best rapper or outlining the extent of systemic oppression faced by Black Americans. So Mel Brooks using rap as a Shakespearean chorus feels like less of a nod to the origins of Robin Hood and more like a simple farcical device. The closest thing we have to minstrel tales are bluegrass ballads, which should make all the sense in the world. If you remember our conversation about Winter's Bone, bluegrass traces its Appalachian roots back to the Scotch-Irish, who preserved this kind of culture that their oppressors from England eventually lost. And while yes, the animated rooster Alan Adale sings comic ditties with a lute, in not too dissimilar a fashion from Ridley Scott's version of the character, he makes it clear that his purpose isn't just as a musician-performer. In fact, here's his introduction to himself and the film. I'm Alan Adale, a minstrel. Oh, that's an early-day folk singer. And my job is to tell it like it is, or was, or whatever. He's a storyteller. And what's really cool about this portrayal is he is both a character in the story and a figure outside of the story all at once. It isn't about him, but he's the witness, which is such a cool detail. If the animated Robin Hood is a folk ballad being told to us, the story structure makes a lot more sense. This isn't a singular story with a clear protagonist and through line and story arc. This is a collection of tales about Robin Hood that feature similar characters and some narrative through lines. It's not too dissimilar to something like A Guest of Robin Hood, one of the earliest ballads we have of the character, which collects 8 stories strung together with a nearly logical through line. Most Robin Hood movies go out of their way to tell a serious story with a clear progression of screenwriting structure. We have an introduction, an inciting incident, rising action, falling action, a climax. This is what modern storytelling looks like. But this isn't the folk story tradition. And with the exception of a clearly defined third act, the animated Robin Hood defies this logic, letting our folk hero just be and exist and whatever. Disney's Robin Hood also finds its accuracy to the traditional character of Robin Hood in its actual depiction and portrayal of disguises. Robin isn't called Hood because that was his family name. He's called Hood because he hides his identity. In some stories, this is quite literal. Robin will have a hood on his head, and then he will lower it to reveal himself to the travelers he holds up on the highway. But in other stories, this is metaphorical. He's Robin Hood because he impersonates others. Whether that's switching places with a potter, or pretending to be a monk, or a beggar, or a peasant in an archery tournament, he's a character known for his tricks and deceptions and disguises. And it's not just Robin who disguises himself in his stories. Other characters do constantly, including the king. Errol Flynn's Robin Hood captures this plot point pretty well, although the earliest stories have the disguised king as King Edward, not Richard. American films do not like depicting disguises, except in comedies. And this has a lot to do with visual logic and the egos of movie stars. Firstly, it is sometimes difficult for audiences to keep track of a character if they change appearances too drastically. I've had this experience myself. A shot will linger on a character in a thriller, and I will suddenly have that terrible feeling that I'm supposed to know who that was, and I can't remember. Second, if you're selling a movie on the star power of a movie star, that actor has to stay looking like that actor. Unless, of course, the transformation is played for laughs, like in Mrs. Doubtfire, or The Pink Panther, or Master of Disguise. We're more likely to see disguises if an actor is playing more than one character, like Eddie Murphy in any of his films, or something like Cloud Atlas. James Bond might put on a disguise, but he still has to look like Sean Connery so we know who the hero is. Russell Crowe's Robin Hood impersonates a knight, but he doesn't look or talk any differently than when he was a soldier. Kevin Costner barely even wears a hood or attempts a British accent, and once he's freed from his prison beard, he doesn't even need to shave. Cary Elwes does actually disguise himself for the archery tournament, and his merry men dress in drag. But again, this is a farce, and the prosthetics and costumes are part of the fun. Errol Flynn dresses up as a peasant in an archery tournament, but he isn't fooling anyone. Everyone knows it's him from the get-go. The disguise doesn't really work. But in the Disney animated movie, when Robin dresses up as a peasant, he actually dresses up as a different character. He's in disguise as a stork and changes his accent and mannerisms. We know it's him because we saw him put on the costume. Prince John and the sheriff suspect that it's him, but they aren't exactly sure. It's only his archery skills that betray him, not his face or his voice or his mannerisms. Prince John is utterly fooled by Little John in a bad costume and wig, just as he is fooled by Robin dressed as a female fortune teller earlier in the film, just as the sheriff is fooled by Robin's blind beggar routine. Robin here is a master of disguise and trickery, a point more fully emphasized by his design. He's a fox, an animal associated with cleverness and cunning. I suppose there is one genre, other than comedy, where actors will actually hide their faces in an attempt at disguise. Superhero movies. Even here, there are many exceptions. Most film versions will dispense with masks, the two glaring exceptions being Spider-Man and Batman, which is related to our topic for a couple of specific reasons. In 2018's Robin Hood, starring Taron Egerton, a disastrous work completely dismissed by critics and audiences alike, Robin disguises himself with a hood and a mask, though his voice is eventually recognized by Marian, a woman he grew up with and knows as Robin of Locksley, once thought dead and now returned to live his playboy life. Because this version of Robin Hood is a sideways remake of Batman Begins, where Robin is Bruce Wayne and the Hood is Batman. This I find very amusing, because Batman is a retooling of Zorro, the star of books and movies, a wealthy landowner who plays playboy during the day, but at night is the dashing hero Zorro, seeking justice for the oppressed underclass. As an acknowledgement to the character's inspiration, the movie Bruce Wayne goes to see with his parents on the night they are fatefully murdered is The Mark of Zorro, starring Tyrone Powers. But here's the funny thing about Zorro. It's just Robin Hood set in Mexico, a folk hero known for his disguises and for cleverly stealing from and defeating his enemies. And here's what I find equally amusing. Zorro means fox in Spanish. Now, if you are confused as to how the playboy by day, adventurer by night trope is at all connected to a character known for stealing from rich people, that is because there are two kinds of Robin Hoods. The earliest stories, and the typical traditional depictions, show Robin as a yeoman. This is a social class a little difficult to understand in our modern context. Yeomen were not peasants, tied to the land and stuck in menial labor. Neither were they landed gentry, the rich and or powerful people who owned most of the land. They were a kind of lower middle class. I think, comparable to the place welders and other skilled tradespeople hold in our society, making good money, but not considered classy in the way office workers might be. A lot of yeomen were soldiers, specifically longbowmen, which is probably why Robin Hood was first associated with them. He's independent of the usual class structure, a free agent, which makes him aspirational to the poor and a threat to the aristocracy. Which is a big reason why, in the 16th and 17th centuries, Robin Hood got a new backstory. In 1598, a play recast Robin as really being Robert, Earl of Huntingdon, a nobleman who is cast out from his inheritance. And here, we get the origin of Robin the monarchist. This is where Robin went from being a Jesse James, Bonnie and Clyde style highwayman robber to being a figure fighting with a usurper and supporting the true monarch. And it makes sense. This is the story the Tudors told about themselves, that they were the true leaders of England and were kicked out during the War of the Roses, only to return triumphantly. This play even features a play within a play structure being performed in the text to King Henry VIII. And so, this is where Robin also becomes a nobleman, leading an army to restore his land and the kingdom. And frankly, this is the most common Robin Hood story we see adapted on film. Errol Flynn is a nobleman, a Saxon aristocrat amassing an army to push out a Norman king oppressing his people. Kevin Costner is Robin of Locksley, come home from the Crusades to reclaim his lands. Even Cary Elwes in Men in Tights is a nobleman on his way home. Russell Crowe gets to be both Robin Hoods, Robin Longstride the archer pretending to be Robert Locksley, the wealthy nobleman. But we don't have many adaptations where Robin gets to be the traditional, standard yeoman, a man of the people, outside of the system. Except for the Disney animated film. Robin isn't wealthy. He has no lands, but neither is he a peasant. He isn't here to raise an army. He isn't here to restore the crown, even if he is a pro-monarchist. He's a folk hero, a trickster using his disguises to steal from the rich and give to the poor. He's here for a good time, but he's also here for the thrill of adventure. This movie might be a mess. It's certainly not polished or sophisticated. But sometimes, to get close to the real thing, to the spirit of a story or a place, you have to leave the structure of convention and travel to where there are literal layers of history. So you can take cringy pictures with great enthusiasm and capture the essence of a folk legend. Thanks for coming.